Hello and welcome to Bedhead Books. Today we're going to be talking about The Birth of Loud by S.Port, which tells the story of the development of the solid-bodied electric guitar and the two men who played the most pivotal role in its development, Leo Fender and Les Paul. Leo Fender, former radio repairman, went on to found his own musical instrument company. Les Paul, established jazz guitarist, had national success with his wife, Mary Ford. So, in the 30s and 40s in America, there wasn't an awful lot for the guitar to do in a band context, purely because you couldn't hear it. They'd discovered a way to amplify it, but it was basically an acoustic guitar with a magnetic pickup inside, which meant that whenever you pushed it above a certain volume, you'd get this horrible feedback loop, and this was a problem that both men encountered. Now, once Fender had started his musical instrument company, he actually started building what we call lap steel guitars, which are effectively a solid block of wood with strings that you play using a piece of metal on the frets. And he thought, well, I need to transfer that so that you can play it like a regular guitar, and that would solve the problem of volume. Meanwhile, Les Paul was tinkering away in his workshop, and he came up with a prototype that he actually took to the Gibson Guitar Corporation, who I don't think they were too taken by Les's woodwork skills. As is mentioned in the book, the prototype garnered the nickname of the Log, so that gives you a clue as to the look and the feel and the size of the guitar. But I guess they clung on to the idea and they wanted to keep Les Paul close, because there is no doubt about it that Les Paul was the biggest musician in the pre-rock and roll era, and having his name attached to something was always going to be beneficial to Gibson. Now, over at Fender, they were starting to develop their solid-bodied electric guitar. It was almost good to go, possibly as a reference to Leo's previous career as a radio repairman. He wanted to call it the Fender Broadcaster, but the Gretsch instrument company at the time, they had a drum kit called the Broadcaster, so they sent cease and desist letters. Fender had to come up with a new name. Now, Fender's marketing man noticed that television had now become the dominant form of entertainment. I think you know what's coming. He renamed it to be the Fender Telecaster, and that's how that guitar came to be. And it was hugely successful, so Gibson obviously wanted to bite back, and they did with their guitar, which they brought Les Paul on board with from an advisory point of view, and he liked it, and he agreed to sign an endorsement deal with Gibson, which meant that the headstock of every guitar was emblazoned with his signature in gold. So, and he played just those guitars from now on. So that was a massive boost for Gibson. So a few years went by, and the feedback sort of started to come in that the design of the Fender Telecaster wasn't entirely comfortable to play. It wasn't the most comfortable guitar to play, and so they worked on streamlining it so that it had a thinner body shape and it had a few curves so that it was sort of closer to your body a little bit. It also had what we call double cutaways, which meant you could access the higher frets of the guitar easier. They put this in development, and they called it the Fender Stratocaster, as a reference to the stratosphere and the space race that was currently hotting up in the mid-50s. Now, if I'm going to talk about comfort, I want to talk about Buddy Holly, who's mentioned in this book as another big name in guitar playing at that time. You know, he was the second rock and roll guitarist effectively after Chuck Berry, and he started off by playing a Gibson Les Paul, but Buddy, like me, was only a little skinny guy, so it was a bit too heavy for him, and so that was what drew him to the Fender Stratocaster. Once he did start playing it, that was a massive boost for Fender, because after he started playing it, Dick Dale started playing one. The Beach Boys all started using Fenders. Even over in the UK, Hank Marvin began using his red Fender Stratocaster. So although there was a couple of modifications made to the Gibson Les Paul, by 61 they were really struggling. So they started coming up with, and I want to talk about this, by the way, this is kind of a personal thing, but they came up with a new design, and I don't believe I never twigged on this until I read the book, is that the design, it is the Fender Stratocaster. It's got the double cutaways, it's got the thinner, curvier body shape, it's more comfortable to play, it's lighter in weight. Les Paul didn't like it. They put his name on it without really telling him, and he didn't like the design and said take it off. And they called it the Gibson Solid Guitar, keeping things nice and simple there. You and I know it today as the Gibson SG, and I have one myself. It's right in my eye line as I record this video, and they are wonderful guitars. They have such a very nice feel to them. They're very comfortable to hold and to play, apart from sounding fantastic, of course. And, you know, the book really brings home that the guitar is kind of a thing of beauty and design ingenuity, and it's completely revolutionized everything, really, from its use by professional musicians to its adoption by amateurs, which is kind of also a little bit of a difference between Gibson and Fender, because Gibson were always sort of, you know, very precious about their manufacturing methods and very sort of quantity over quality, that mindset, you know, making more money from selling to professional established musicians, whereas Fender, because they could churn out their guitars quicker, they appealed to a wider demographic, and a demographic who could afford them, a demographic who started playing, and, you know, they encouraged an entire generation. So I want to talk finally about the roles that the two men do play in the story, because they are kind of two sides of the same coin, really. Leo Fender, although he wasn't a player, he couldn't play guitar, he was massively important in terms of the invention, the building, the construction, the design. Apart from the guitars, he also gave us the Fender bass, which meant that bass players no longer had to lug around the big upright bass. They could stand alongside the guitarists, and it was, you know, better for them. Life was better for them, and Fender bass kind of became an instrument in its own right at the time because it was so revolutionary. Fender also put a lot of money into a electric piano designed by Harold Rhodes, which we will talk about in a future episode. Les Paul was a lot more the musical side. You know, he released a lot of singles, as I say, with his wife Mary Ford. He was a big pioneer in multi-track recording, which, you know, that changed how music was made. And as I say, the fact that his name was attached to this guitar allowed it to have this association of coolness, of, you know, success. And really, that's the role that the two men play. So, although in places, especially if you are a guitarist like myself, this book will feel like familiar ground, it is familiar ground that I, for one, am very happy to walk over. And I'm going to give The Birth of Loud a 9 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching, and remember, don't judge this book by its cover. Well, that'll be the day when you say goodbye, yes, that'll be the day when you make me cry. You say you're gonna leave